Now, I'm excited and honored to introduce our speaker. Dr. Bo Zhang is a landscape architect, urban designer, architect, and LEED certified professional. He is currently an assistant professor of landscape architecture at Oklahoma State University, where he teaches landscape construction, communications, open space design, and urban design. As an expert on research methods and crowdsourced data analysis, Dr. Zhang has a keen interest in promoting public space usage and related design methodology through valid and vigorous scholarly research. His research has been funded by Winterthur Research Fellowship, Rockefeller Archive Center, Chiang Ching-kwo Foundation, Oklahoma Humanities Council, Oklahoma State University, and other organizations. He has received multiple awards, including National ASLA and EDRA Research Awards. Today, Dr. Zhang is presenting his talk, Smart Landscape, Compacted Landscape, Critically Engaging Social Media to Understand Open Space Publicity. Welcome, Dr. Zhang. You're muted.
Thank you. So thank you very much. So it's my great honor to participate and speak at the LABash. It made me feel young and smart. So on the screen, you can see a very famous site at the beginning of this year, which is called Four Seasons Total Landscaping. So it ends the chaotic political election at the very beginning of this year. And for landscape architects, I find this interesting. How does landscaping convey the meanings to the society and to the design community? So, as everybody knows, landscaping and the landscaper are two tattoos we never want to use in our profession. We are landscape architects. But compare with what we think we can do and what the society and our peers think we do, there is a huge gap. And the gap is not created only by our profession, but also can be perceived by our relatives and the society as a whole. On the other hand, landscape is such a word used so widely. We can see, see people use the landscape of literature, the landscape of Shakespeare research, and the landscape of soil research. So for landscape architects, try to survive in this interesting world, we may want to rethink about landscape and how should we make this the word landscape as less superficial, less uninteresting, and more sophisticated. So my today's talk is titled Smart Landscape, Compacted Landscape. So try to be smart. One strategy I always do is go back to history. I think long before the creation of landscape architecture profession, we do human nature involves the appreciation of outdoor environment. So what you can see on the screen is an oil painting. So it's documented the sceneries in Rome. So it was supposed to sell to a noble grand tourist, a nobleman, and tour this Italian site. So those paintings are supposed today we think those paintings are artworks, but several hundred years ago, they are basically products. They are product to document the sceneries. So the tourist has no digital camera, they have no camera, and they have no way to document it. So most of the time, they will bring this very expensive documentation of nature to home and communicate with their friends, their family, and their neighbors. So how expensive those paintings could be. So according to some research, one painting a noble young man bought in Rome could be 2 years' salary of a skilled craftsman. So 2 years' salary. So if somebody is not as wealthy, and they may purchase those kind of like a print which is in mass production. Those paintings and the prints nowadays are read by art historians for people's custom, people's way of transportation and the lifestyle, but they really read as a piece of outdoor environment appreciation. So for landscape architects, we should always recognize that the people's appreciation and the people's desire to record the outdoor environment is huge. So in the other way, like if a man is wealthier, so he can commission artists to do a custom-made painting. So like on the screen, you can see this is Gotha, a famous German poet, so what you can see is like he situated himself, or maybe the artist situated himself in the outdoor environment. So with those like classical relics and the further landscape and the city. So we see these paintings a lot, and we see this people's desire a lot. So always remember, so this is not expensive. This costs a lot of money, and the people may do this like once in their lifetime. Compare with today, so on my screen you can see this is my students, the ASLA Student Club at the Oklahoma State University. You can see, there is some chat there. Okay, so you can see two students are sitting in front of a sign. Actually, our student won the sign competition among all the student clubs. So they are happy. They used their cell phone and they took a picture, and instantly they put that on their social media, Instagram. So you can see many students, and they have like a lot of likes from other friends, and they can use words to explain that. So let's try to compare these two images. So one is a noble young man like standing in front of this beautiful Italian landscape, and the other is like on a campus outdoor environment, our students are standing. So we can tell like they share a lot of like similarity. So something different is like on the left is so expensive. It can be done only like several times in one nobleman's lifetime. And on the right, people can do that almost every minute or every second. And it can be recorded. It can be liked. It does not need like a salon living room to communicate the appreciation of outdoor environment. So this introduces the topic I want to discuss today, which is we as landscape architects, as well as others, are living in a social media environment. So in 2018, 2.5 billion people use Facebook in like at least like at a monthly basis, which is like more than 1/3 of the world population. So other social media are still catching up. So which means like almost like, especially in United States, no matter young or old, people try to engaging with the social media. So the mechanisms of why people like social media is still under investigation. But what you can see is like there is like the rumor is not right. So we can see the young as well as old people like to use social media. And not only that, so you can see the yellow bar on my screen. So people use social media on their like desktop as well as their cell phone. They use that more and more. They spend more hours onto that. So there is anxiety of using social media. So you can see this. This is like a film. If you're old enough, you know this was produced in 1999. So it's called The Matrix. So on the screen, you can see this is Keanu Reeves. So he tried to play the good guy. But through all this film, there is an anxiety of human controlled by digital devices, people controlled by the digital world. How should we, as landscape architects, make use of social media? And how can the new forms of communication and the publishing in the digital age bring considerable intellectual weight to the topics of today? And how can the space planners and be informed instead of desperately overwhelmed by today's massive amount of information? So this is the topic by the film. So you can see there's like a nice screen at the background. So this will remind me landscape. That's what we use a lot. But in this world is definitely the digital data. So we may want to find a smart way or smart ways to decipher all those information. And the premise for that is people use social media to communicate their appreciation of nature and in a regular basis. If you look at my screen, you can see on the top, there are sceneries people want to record and hang on their walls. They want to embed themselves into the landscape. At the same time, from the paintings, from the images, we can record and read people's facial expression. So this is not quite different in today's social media associated with documenting people's appreciation of nature and outdoor environment. So people put unhuman images. So what you can see like lower left, so people document images which include people's activities, not necessarily standing or like riding a horse or like sitting, but all kinds of activities. As well as people, you can see the variety of facial expressions were recorded by social media. So not necessarily those kind of neutral face. People think like this kind of facial expression will be inherited by like generations. So images as well as like a text. So in those old like Asian antiques, so there is no way people can express their attention, their emotion, their experiences. But nowadays, people can use their cell phone and type like whatever they like, or like use hashtag to use other people's creative labels for those attentions, activities, and perceptions. So our design and research team developed a method trying to decipher and systematically code the chaotic ocean of social media data. So we basically group those into unhuman images, which are objects and sceneries. So the rest of those are human included images, so which include headshots, which are like, you can see, like mostly like those are like heads, and we can read their facial expressions, as well as activities. So we can see people jumping, dancing, singing, sitting, standing in the environment. And the other set of categorization is for the text. So in this way, we cannot see people's face, but they do have objects and scenes. So most of those are in nouns. So activities, most of them are in verbs, and experiences. So most of those are in adjectives, but there are some exceptions I do not want to discuss in detail. So in using this method, we try to make sense of this data. So this data can be coded and put into different patterns, help us to understand the usage of everyday landscape. So there are several case studies I want to present it here. So first one is the Seattle Freeway Park. This park was designed by Lawrence Halperin and engineer Dana Weaver. It was built in 1976. It is a masterpiece in design history. So this iconic concrete hedges and the blocks just make people make it unforgettable. But in social media, we see this not only as objects and forms and spaces. We can see people using this at the daily basis, and we can see people how to appreciate this. So using the method I just mentioned, we can create the daily, monthly, and the yearly usage patterns and see how really people actually using this part. And using this photo field of view method, we try to understand where people take pictures and from which angle the picture was taken. And we overlay all those angles and try to find where is the hottest spot and where is the hottest angle of the park usage. So it's not quite surprising. You can see this concrete canyon actually is people use a lot, but we do have some interesting findings. So for this park, we see very rare group activities. So we can see people like to come as individuals. And also in this park, compared with a lot we have done in others, we see this neutral face, no smile, okay, no smile. So, and we try to put our data in different categories. So the yellow one you see here is actually the recorded people's attention on objects and scenes. The blue one, you can see people's activities. And this red one and green one is actually people's perceptions and facial expressions. We find some interesting thing for this park. So this park is in such a spatial enclosure, it lacks public activities. It's like on the picture on the left is the only smiling face we find in winter in this park. So when people took pictures about this park, in addition to the concrete canyons, people like to take pictures towards the sky, all those skylines. So that might give us some clue. And also, this is such a popular spot for cosplay. So you can see people dress in different costumes, right? And they try to be a cartoon figure or something in the park. So based on a theory, these cosplayers like to be situated in a surrealistic environment. So that may help us to explain why this park is lack publicity. And also it helps us to understand why this park is not liked by locals. Seattle Freeway Park was selected as a national landmark heritage, but it was denied by the local and landmark committee because they think this park is not quite welcome. There's a lot of crimes. Try to understand why people like it or why people not like it, and they try to depict the several experiential dimensions of this park. We create this wheel. So what you can see is like people attachment is people's likeness. Brutalism is a lot of people mention that. Concrete structure is the main feature of this park. Discovery is actually a lot of people's reflections and perceptions, natural scenes, and physical activities. What we can see is there are a strong connection between concrete structures and brutalism. So that's the main feature of this park, as well as discovery and physical activities. So which means in this park, people like to have a lot of activities. They enjoy the adventurous experience in the park, and that comes from concrete structures and brutalism. It's not from the natural sceneries, and the attachment to this park is very low. So that's helped us to understand the complicated mechanisms of park usage. A good park, a famous park, a park liked to behave like adventurous activities, but not a lot of publicity. So the second case study is in Fort Worth Water Gardens. So this is a unique park in the city of Fort Worth. So if you haven't been there, so it has several water features. So this is aerated water. So you can see those kind of misty features. It has like a peaceful reflective water. Of course, it has this kind of big recessed major water feature. So for us, like we're really interested in this park because nowadays we see fewer and fewer water features created in the city. Does people really like water feature? Does water feature worthwhile in today's public life? So from this park, we see people's interactions with water. People like to touch water. People like to look at water. People like to be embedded with water. And also for this park, it has some like controlled study areas. For example, this terrace, the mountain area, this hill area, you can see like this is actually very dangerous, but people use it. So we categorize this park into 9 different areas. So the first one is the bottom of the active pond. The second one is the intermediate area of the active pond. The third is the ground level of the active pond. The fourth area is the aerated pond. And the fifth area is the quiet pond. The sixth is the hill, which has no water feature. And the number 7 is the central plaza, no water feature. Number 8 is the entrance with no water feature. And the number 9 is entrances with water feature. So, and we try to understand the acoustic, spatial, and water features for these 9 areas. And we try to see for these 9 different areas, so how is the popularity of park usage? And how does people have different activities, perceptions, and facial expressions. So what you can see is actually here. So this is the 9 different areas. Just please try to remember this area. So like lower left, this is the most active palm. And the number 5, upper right, is this reflection palm, very peaceful. And number 4 is the aerated palm, which is the misty water feature. So what do we learn? If we look at the park popularity, you can see, of course, like the watered area is much more welcomed and popular than other areas. At the same time, you can see like the red area is with human activities. And the orange area is only pictures with scenes. What you can see is for different water features, like for the active palm, people really like to be part of it. And for other areas, people may like the water by itself. And we try to understand people's activities. So there's a lot of fun looking at those images. I cannot show you everything, but you can not imagine even in your design, maybe in the future, like how people actually use your design and how people like have all those different gestures and activities in a park. So for us, we try to understand where people stand and where people sit. And we try to understand where people have those kind of weird activities. So when like you can hear the water in like the acoustic quality of the water is very, very loud. People like to have this kind of very grand gestures. People like to have interaction with water, try to touch water. People like to kiss each other for some occasions if they think the environment is really memorable. And also people like to have those kind of dangerous activities. So like I do not want to like lead a student like group like this to for the walls, but you can see that's how people use it. So we try to relate people's activity with our design. So the acoustic quality, the spatial quality, as well as the water forms. So what you can see here is actually people really are excited about the active palm, especially at the bottom of the active palm. They are so excited. They have so many grand gestures. But for the active palm, people tend to protect themselves. They do not have a dangerous actions. Instead, the hilled area, which is the terraced hilled area, they do have a lot of like dangerous activities. So for the peaceful palm, which is the quiet palm, people really want to have interactions with water. So, and also we would like to read people's facial expressions versus their actions. So you can see like when people took the picture, is a very natural. They voluntarily posted those. But if you try to analyze that in an aggregate way, we can see the pattern. We can see where people really like to laugh, where people just smile, and where we have the neutral faces. So we'll go quick to this. So I now want to go. So we do have those hashtag as well as perceptions and the sense of discovery and the sense of social interactions. So our question for this study is, we understand that in so many dimensions, it's not only one dimension. We try to understand that in popularity, the social interaction, facial expression, and the people's activities. So it's proved people really like water features. The design of water feature are very successful, but they have a lot of differences. The active pond was engaging to people, and it was evident from the big gestures and smiling faces. The aerated pond was more seated activities and generate surrealistic perceptions. The quiet pond attracts lots of human-water interactions, and people seem to enjoy this feature as a landscape image with no human intervention. So let's try to move forward. We're still on time. So case study number 3, Bryant Park in New York City. I believe everybody should be very familiar with this park. This was regarded as an open space model for all urban redevelopment for the city of New York revival. And this is regarded not only by academia, but also practitioners. So for us, by using social media, we have some ambition, okay? We try to test one technique we learned in our life, which is called the bubble diagram. So bubble diagram, I believe everybody is familiar with that. We use bubble diagram to program all those elements in a design. So with summative bubbles, it has no form, basically no direction. And it's a good way to study the size, relationship, and the suitability of the design program. And also, it's a solid framework for more specific conceptual design phase. So what you can see is like, this is a bubble diagram. I try to create it from the renovated Bryant Park. So it's kind of like a central lawn. It has different like reading, public open reading rooms. It has fountains, memorials, has like dining areas, ping pong areas, food kiosks, and grill, library, terrace, cafe, all those. But bubble diagram was never tested. Bubble diagram is never tested as a post-occupancy framework. Its accuracy and complexity is never visited. So in this case study, we try to use Bryant Park as a case study, and I try to see, hey, how can we using the social media data, and I try to test the bubble diagrams and see the bubble diagrams and the designer created at the very beginning, are they accurate? Are they positive? If they're positive, if there is any competition among different programs. So we successfully done that, and we try to mine the data from the Instagram use data platform with a label for Bryant Park in New York City. And we try to categorize those data into perception, attention, and activities. So on the screen, you can see the green areas are, green bubbles are attentions in the sceneries and objects. The purple ones are activities, and the orange ones are perceptions. What we try to do is we try to put those into different categories. So on this screen, you can see all those different bubbles. So that's indicate monthly popularity of top park programs. So what you can see is this one, like a winter village. So it's really popular, like during winter time after Thanksgiving. And people really like to see the skylines. So that's not part of the park design, but that's where people's attention went to. And people really like to see people, okay? Like women, like children, men, elderly. And people kind of like a monument sculpture. They recognize that. And interestingly, people didn't quite pay a lot of attention to plants and grass lawn. It doesn't mean it's not important, is people didn't want to label those. But here you can see by posting the activities, we can see the event long actually are used a lot. So the yoga is very popular during the winter time. Eat and dine, that's a major feature in the park. It's so popular. In the drinking, eating, markets, protests, and philosophical events, all those draw a lot of attentions. And lastly, we can see the perception of this park. So what I want to just mention here is the attachment is really high. Okay? So which means people are happy and people are have good time in this park. People find this is a relaxing and environment and escaping experience. So people try to relate this park to their locality. So which means they label a lot of New York City is so good, lifestyle there. And also this park generates a lot of sociality and publicity. So this is something we find is very interesting. We try to quantify the bubble diagrams. So we put the activities and the park programs here, so we can track which area is really happening, and we group those for different areas. So what you can see here is so the seating area is okay. So the lawn area is heavily used. The path area is actually regularly used for all kinds of activities. So the designated dining area is so popular. And also some out of park programs, for example, the skyline and the transit also is people's concerns. Okay. And go to the next one. So for this park, for those bubble diagrams, not only we try to understand whether those bubbles are accurate and sufficient, we try to understand the relationship of those bubbles. So which means for a certain area, for example, that event long, does that really generate positive perceptions and positive activities? Are those used a lot? So we put the 3 colors of bubbles. Sorry, this is a little bit confusing, but you can see this network is way more complicated than our bubble diagram. But we try to understand this by reading the size of the bubbles, okay, the width of these lines, as well as the centrality of the location of these bubbles. Okay, so what we find is we can do that for almost everything we want to study. So for example, where does people's attachment come from in this part? So by understanding this attachment bubble, we try to find the bubbles relate to this. So what you can see here is in June, in the park, actually dining experiences as well as public concert contribute to an attachment greatly. And also in December, attachment actually comes from ice skates, eats, and market. So which is so different. And for the winter village, so in June, so it's not important at all, of course. And in December, what's the effect? So it generates attachment, it promotes locality, it helps people to have a festive perception of the space. So on and so forth. In this way, we try to understand the usage of a park, a public space in a more with higher complexity and richness. So the last case study, what I want to present here is the Monument Avenue in Richmond, Virginia. I believe everybody knows this park. This open space actually changed dramatically. So this is not my design. This is my studio project. So like actually my student designed this project. So it was conducted in 2019. So it's 1 year before it caused national attention. So what my strategy is, I will let the student to read the social media. So at that time, the social media is not actually politicalized. So people genuine have a lot of like genuine reaction and statement about the park. What we find is like basically people realize the social and political threats of this open space. At the same time, a lot of people think this park is a nice open outdoor space. So after discussing with my students, so we come up with the idea. So we try to put the existing monuments on site. They can change it, they can demolish it, but the material, the physical material have to be remained on the site. So we think this is an interesting way to extend history rather than to delete and discard history. And by critically reading people's reactions, we find like there are multiple theoretical threats. So, which means a public environment means many things to users. It can be symbolism. It can be a walking environment. It could be a piece of like ecological patch. So for our students, so their strategy is by reading those, they try to not change keep this statue on site. Actually, sorry, like this is already removed, but this is our imaginative test. So, and trying to put a very serious layer into that. The language they're going to use actually are totally for designers. Spaces, views, access, and experiences. So one group of students, they propose to recess the statue, and they try to create a more equal dialogue environment. Okay? And under this whole they created, they try to rewrite the history when the statue was built and how this people should be reacted to this. So they want to put a chronicle history there. You can see this is their basically spatial design. This is the tunnel. This is the enclosure they create with the statue at the back, which is not lit up in the evening. And also they try to create this area as a more humane area with this statue being there, reminding unforgettable history. Another group of students that did something different. So they think, hey, we do not want to touch the statue. The statue needs to be there. So they quote, like, we are here to make history, not to relive it. And at the same time, they think like there needs to be some reminders in a landscape architecture language about the history on site. Their strategy is framing. So trying to frame like the Robert Lee statue. They create axis, they create zigzag spatial spaces, and they try to, so for every zigzag space you can see here, they try to include like a piece of history in this journey. So this is an unfinished journey, and in terms of view and access, the statue actually was engaged. So it's a human space, it's a reminder space, and it's a space for people's contemplation. Okay, so what else? So we introduced 4 different case studies, so which all engage social media. So my conclusion is, please cherishing the liberating power of social media. Under this tacky appearance of social media posts, embedded seeds of freedom. There are simple posts indicates every day with unprecedented genuineness, effectiveness, and richness. It suggests a new democracy. It is not a democracy that someone stands against the corrupted statement or votes to be casted for government. People construct this social media democracy of public space usage by visiting and avoiding an intended public entity by foot and in eye, by voluntarily posting a smiling selfie in landscape image everyone can see, or by elaborating a narrative. This phrasing is subtle and natural. And it is so true and so real, so please cherish that. And I urge you, the future and hope of landscape architects community, to give up a little bit of design hegemony as well as artistic egomania, and smartly embracing the voice, image, and the record of publicity of open spaces that are available by the contemporary technology. To pick up the smartness in reading social media with sympathy, sensitivity, systematic method, and critical minds. This may diminish some didacticism from professors, some proposition from a theoretician, some voices from a design master or magazine article, or in other ways strengthen and consolidate it. No matter what, this empower an individual landscape architect's courage to explore and be inspired. So from there, bound to be a smart landscape, a compacted landscape of enhanced sophistication. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this incredible talk. So now we will take any questions from the Zoom Q&A feature. Here, the first question here is design is influenced by social media, or social media is influenced by design? Which one is the leader?
That's a very, very good question. I think this is a loop. So I think like design is influenced by social media. Design can be inspired by social media, and the social media is a reflection of the usage and the perception of design. So this is a loop, it's a never ending, but at the like in between design and the social media stands landscape architects. We can convert the understanding of social media to design, and we try to understand our design by reading people's social media. Sometimes it's very embarrassing, but it's okay. So like my conclusion for this question is like, don't be guilty of using social media, but when we use it, we want to use it in a very smart way.
Interesting. And here is another question. It is very impressive to use social media as an indicator of what the people really feel, think, use the built environment. And the question here is related to data processing. What's the collecting approach you used?
Oh, that's another very good question. So I'm not a data scientist. So I work with a few data scientists in our university, and also like you may know Professor Yang Song from Texas A&M University. So I think most of this software and the programs I use are very, very simple. I mean, simple for a computer scientist or computer engineer. But I think for us, it's more important to understand like if there is a framework, how we are going to do the analysis. And I think, but yes, as you said, like data analysis, you may want to find an expert. Another thing I want to mention is like nowadays tend to do this kind of aggregate analysis of data. But for me, I feel like reading each and every single post is also very important. So a lot of posts, actually, they have no other related posts. It's standing by itself, but it's very insightful. So I think like in this regard, even like people with no data scientists, they can quote the social media, they can maybe not in a very systematic way, but it could be a very insightful way.
That's a great point to have a balance. But I think the attendees are really interested in the software. So here is another question. If you could design an app that facilitates open forums about people's experiences in public spaces, are there specific app features that you would include?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think I want to include everything. So which means I want to, so nowadays we do have for example, like Instagram and Twitter, those are the data. We have the geographic location, the GIS data, the graphic data, the textual data, the time data. So all those are actually included. But we know like there are several things we can wear something, we can wear those equipment. So you can test people's blood pressure. You can test people's movement. And actually our cell phone can do that, but it's not included. So, and also like in other way of data analyzing, some of other professors helping me is using videos like a camera videos to see people's movement. That's a whole another story. But just to answer this question, I think current data I think is very rich. And I used to pay a lot of attention to the systematic analysis of data. And right now I feel like both the aggregate analysis and the single post reading is very important. And if I can add anything, I would like to say a lot of like medical data, like well, also like today people think how you can find how people think, right? Like the brain, digital, and all those. That's a dream, but so the other way is like there is a gap between the real social media and the real people's thoughts and perception. So social media only include people think the experience and the scenery and activities worth sharing. That's very important to landscape architecture, actually. But how accurate is that? I think sometimes we may have to go back to our daily observation and the interview and really find that out.
I see. So here is another question that related to more details of the research. Here, it is about what methods or software such as Gephi did you use to distill the data from photos on social media? Is there anything particular you can mention to help speed up the evaluation process of the site?
Very good question. I think, yes. So as you can see on my screen, So let me minimize this. So as you can see on my screen, this graphic is actually generated by Gephi. So this one, so far, we can only generate the textual data. We cannot relate anything with the imagery data. So, and the way we do that is we try to group all those words from as the same sentence. So, for example, we mentioned happy and we mentioned plaza in one sentence, we can add one connection between those two. That's our national or rationale of putting this Gephi. So we just use one sentence as the unit, trying to create those connection. And anything outside of one sentence, we think is not relevant or is not related. So we do a cumulative analysis and put those together. So, yeah.
I see. So there seems no open questions right now, but there was a message from the chat. So one of the attendees asked, maybe not a question so much, but one difference between historical imagery versus what we see of social media is that much of the image today is candid as opposed to post, though of course not all. Do you try to differentiate between post or planned versus candid imagery for your data?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. I'm so lazy, I haven't done that, but this is a direction I can go in the future. Yes, I think we know people like freedom. I think as I mentioned in the lecture, people like to see whatever they think is valuable. But before this smartphone era, people's view actually are framed by experts. So those experts are artists. They are like the postcard production companies. They frame people's view and think, hey, you should look at this. This is definitely fancy. This is definitely perfect. So it would be very, very interesting because in the 19th and early 20th century, we do have, in addition to a lot of print, we have a lot of postcards. At that time, the camera was not very popular. So people's view of things, view of outdoor landscape actually was framed. I would like to say framed at the same time informed by the experts. Those experts include the journalists, include the artists, include the art companies. So yes, I think the answer is I haven't done that, but it's a very interesting idea. I think everybody can do that, and I'm happy to share, and I'm happy to read all those results.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zhang. That's perfect timing. I think we will end here to accommodate next Zoom section. Thank you again, Dr. Zhang, for this wonderful presentation and sharing. And thank you to all attendees for joining this session. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you, audience, and thank you, the committee. I appreciate your work and coming to my presentation.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.